I don't like talking about mysteries that don't have an answer. Even with some of my most obscure topics, there have been at least one or two solid theories. Some have had modern papers written about them, with others I've had to make do with articles from 50 years ago. But not this time. This time, there's nothing. This is Llyn Tegid, or Bala Lake, formerly known as Penllyn in English, a name so disgusting I find myself glad that it fell out of use. It's a part of Wales in the UK today, but 1,000 years ago this wasn't the case. Back then, various local kingdoms vied for control over this area, and over Wales, and you'd expect this lake just to be another battleground for wealthy autocrats to throw themselves at. But recently I found something very odd, something that almost no one has ever even mentioned before. Kings, 20 of them, who are all attached to this area and whose names have never ever been mentioned before or since by almost anyone. It seems that this small piece of land nestled amongst the mountains of Wales may have been home to its own independent rulers, their own veritable kingdom of the lake, until they completely vanished from history, leaving behind a mystery that is, to this day, completely unsolved. These are the 20 forgotten kings of the lake. We should start with the most concrete source of information. Around the year 988, a big list was compiled, which is always exciting for me. This document listed the genealogies of a bunch of kings of the Britons, both contemporary and extinct, including rulers from Scotland, England, and the majority being from Wales. These ancestries weren't recorded for purely altruistic purposes, though. Instead, several kingdoms had their creations tied to the ancestors of the kings of Gwynedd in North Wales, who, in a shocking coincidence, were the ones compiling this document in the first place. But this doesn't matter to us today, because we're only curious about the 21st set of names on this list. Some of these men have ancestries allegedly stretching back to the 5th century, to when the Roman legions withdrew from Britannia. They claim descent from emperors and kings, famous figures and mythological heroes. But not this guy. Meirion ap Lleiddogw, the shortest and most mysterious genealogy out of any of them. No one else is recorded like this, just a king and his father. It's bizarre. Even stranger is that this name, Lleiddogw, is completely unique. It's not found anywhere else, not just outside of this manuscript, but nowhere outside of this tiny sentence. But while these aspects are strange, we can draw a few conclusions. Meirion must have been a king, as that's what these genealogies were recording, but we don't yet know where he ruled. He must also have been alive before their composition, obviously, which was around the late 10th century, but we can't be certain if he was still living when his brief ancestry was recorded. This document does preserve the heritage of contemporary kingdoms, but it also included the lineages of several places in Wales that had already been conquered by the 10th century. And that's it. 2 names, no concrete place, no proper date, and for one, there isn't even another record of someone else with his name. On its own, it's too mundane to be a mystery, too short to spark an interest, and it's no surprise that I could only find one modern historian, Peter Bartrum, that ever even bothered to mention them, and that was over 30 years ago. But that's not everything, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking about it today, because these 2 men do appear in one other manuscript, and they're joined here by 18 other equally bizarre names. This is the Hanes Hen, the old story, also known more straightforwardly as the Llywelyn ab Iorwerth genealogies, and they contain a very interesting bit of information. Under the label Gweheleth Penllyn, we can find Meirion ap Lleiddogw again, along with 18 of their ancestors, none of which you have to remember. Coed, Doned, Tidwal, Ednaved, Brochwel, Dyfnwal, Deiniog, Cadwr, Pibir, Caper, Piter, Estader, Pandulf, Cundulf, Gorvlung, Beblich, Silbich, and Pebyd Penllyn. This finally gives us a location, Penllyn, the head of the lake, which was the name for the area of land around Llyn Tegid. It also gives us a grand total of 20 names, 14 of which are completely unique to this lineage. Unfortunately, that's pretty much it. What you can see here is the sum total of what's been left behind by these men, published in this case by a 19th century book with the longest name I have ever seen. It even contains 2 etceteras. We can hypothesize then that Meirion, son of Lleiddogw, was a king in Penllyn sometime prior to the end of the 10th century. He was important enough to record, but it doesn't seem like any of his ancestors were, as the kings of Gwynedd just listed his father. This seems to suggest that Meirion's rule was relatively recent then, as unlike his neighbours, his ancestry didn't stretch back to the 5th century. It instead stopped quite abruptly. We can see something similar in a neighbouring kingdom with another short genealogy, Rhufeiniog, who only have 5 listed kings. What's different about them though is that although their kingdom was conquered, their royal family continued to persist, and a famous 12th century poet named Gwalchmai claimed descent from them through his mother, allowing the historian Bartrum to theorise that their final king was likely alive during the composition of the Llyn genealogies, allowing him to cautiously estimate that Rhufeiniog's first king then must have been born by about 830, which, as I said, would have made their kingdom very new at the time. We cannot confidently say if this was the case for Meirion of Penllyn, because we can't confidently say almost anything about him. All we can conclude from the sources that he very likely existed, that he was independent, contemporary or near contemporary to the end of the 10th century, and that he probably ruled in Penllyn. Based on how short his ancestry is, we could theorise that his kingdom was relatively new, and there is precedent for that, but that's it. In 1993, the historian Peter Bartrum became the most recent person to mention this line of kings, and for almost all of them he had only a single sentence to say, describing them as a member of an otherwise unknown line of princes in Penllyn. I had hoped that after 32 years someone would have also covered them, but I couldn't find anything. Not for the kingdom, not for the dynasty, and not even for individual members. Today I have the privilege of this title, the most recent person to cover Penllyn, and honestly during my research I probably earned the accolade of most recent person to think about the kings of Penllyn too. If you want to hear about strong conclusions, then you've already heard them all. Until a new source of information like a new manuscript is discovered, this is all we can ever confidently say about the kings of Penllyn, that at least one of them existed. And that was originally where I was going to end the video. However, if you're in the mood to speculate, there are a few less confident bits of information to be found. There are 2 theories we can work with, where this lineage might have come from and where they might have gone, and both of these questions can help us ask the ultimate one. Who were these forgotten kings of the lake? As I mentioned, none of these men have anything much written about them. All I could find during my research were Bartrum's notes and nothing else. In fact, the majority of these names don't even occur anywhere else. There is something though about the first king in this list, Tegid Penllyn, and what's curious about him is the similarity between his name and the name of his lake, Llyn Tegid. This lake was allegedly named after Tegid, who was supposedly an old, bald king of the area until his land got flooded, potentially by a local saint that forgot to cover the magic well, a classic mistake that I'm sure we've all made. Now, the names aren't that similar, but they're close enough for me to wonder if this was supposed to be Tegid. This man was a notable figure in mythology. He was supposedly the ancestor of the patron saint of Wales, and he was a historic king of Penllyn. It makes sense for another king in the area to claim descent from him, especially if his name is on the local lake, so did they? Did Meirion originally claim descent from Tegid, only for it to become corrupted over the centuries into Tegid? This entire list is so unusual that I don't think it's impossible, it's just absolutely not certain. If this was the case, then the 13th century genealogy would seem to claim that Meirion of Penllyn descended from the oldest kings of the area, which would make sense and is basically the whole idea of making a genealogy like this, adding legitimacy and antiquity to your lineage, and in this case directly attaching yourself to the landscape. One point against Tegid being Tegid though is that none of Tegid's descendants are listed, so it would just be him and an otherwise unknown and unmentioned son called Cilbech. which is a noticeably weaker and weirder claim. Although, there is something strange here, because Mavrion didn't make this claim. It was recorded centuries after his rule, and his genealogy just stopped at his father. So that leaves us with one final theory. If Mavrion didn't make this claim, then who did? I said before that Bartrum only had a single sentence to say about almost all of these men, and that's because Mavrion has one more bit of odd information attached to him. In a version of his genealogy from the 16th century, his name comes with an asterisk, claiming that he was also known as Blythe Rhydd of Guest, a revelation that likely means nothing to anyone. Blythe Rhydd the Red Wolf was the father-in-law of an 11th century king in North Wales, and the ancestor of a wealthy and powerful landowner named Rhydd Vladd of Penllyn. This would seem to link these two figures then. A nobleman of Penllyn descended from the old kings of that area, but there are two problems. Firstly, Blythe Rhydd of Guest lived in a Guest, which is over here, part of the earth-spanning region known as not Penllyn. Secondly, since he was the father-in-law of an 11th century king, Bartrum has estimated his birth to have been by about the year 1000, making it difficult for him to have been alive and ruling by 988, if not much earlier. Because of this, Bartrum has deemed this connection unlikely, but as I've said, we can hypothesize. Because luckily for you, I've read through many of these noblemen's ancestries before, a hobby that makes me really fun at family gatherings, and a lot of these texts are very strange. We can find pedigrees with duplicate names, pedigrees that combine several men with the same name into one. We have lists that fuse brothers together, and ones that claim two brothers were born 200 years apart. Not to mention ones that miss out on whole generations, such as this example here. Llywelyn, Lord of Yscerdyn in Ceredigion, which is the pedigree I want to focus on. Llywelyn attaches himself to an old king of Ceredigion, although he spells his name incorrectly. But what's odd is that he only does this in 5 generations, meaning his ancestry, according to him and this very text, bridged nearly 4 centuries with only 5 men. Coupled with this, the remainder of his ancestors don't match the kings of Ceredigion at all. It's a jumbled and odd mess, but these errors are not even close to being unique, which brings me back to Rhydd of Penllyn. Bartrum said that Mavrion of Penllyn being the same man as Blythe Rhydd was unlikely, and for a very good reason. But there's also a reason why it's not impossible. As I already mentioned, this is pure speculation for speculation's sake, theorizing because there's nothing else concrete to say, but you're in too deep to go back now. As we've seen, these genealogies can be such a mess that it's not entirely out of the question that by the 16th century, there were a few generations lost between Blythe Rhydd, father-in-law to an 11th century king, and Mavrion of Penllyn, a monarch from the 10th century or earlier. This genealogy claims they were the same person, but Blythe Rhydd could have just been a descendant. If that were the case, and that's a big if, then these connections and ancestries would at least appear to have a reason for existing, something that my son has yet to achieve. Rhydd Vladd was a powerful landowner in Penllyn, descended from a man that a 16th century manuscript claimed was the last recorded king in the area. They could just be wrong, it wouldn't even be slightly surprising if they were, but perhaps they were just mistaken. Maybe the reason Mavrion's genealogy expanded in the century after Rhydd's existence was because he made an effort to attach himself through his mother to the old lineage of the region, and perhaps to Tegid, the mythological king of the lake. We have no concrete proof of this, of course, but many, if not almost all of the other ancestries of medieval Welsh noblemen follow similar patterns to this. Missing generations, incorrect spellings or entirely different names, men being fused together, famous figures being ripped through time to become their ancestor, they have it all. Which makes me curious if the origin for all of this, for every expanded detail that added to the shortest and most mysterious genealogy in medieval Wales, was for a powerful nobleman in Penllyn to attach himself to this lake's erstwhile kings, whether through a genuine historical connection or just through pure invention. Either way, these obscure details eventually suffered the fate of almost all of history, falling through the cracks of time, leaving absolutely nothing behind, and winding up as no more than an asterisk in a text published centuries later. I may have been the most recent person to talk about the kings of Penllyn in over 30 years, and perhaps I've become the most recent person to think about them too, but if I've done my job properly, then I've lost that second title to you today. We have absolutely no idea who any of these men were. We have no clue if 18 of them even existed at all. We don't know if they were genuinely connected to a powerful landowner in the area, if their descendants lived on through the noblemen of North Wales, or if these connections were just drawn up to legitimise an aristocrat's claim. All we can say is that Meirion ap Lleddogw existed. He was a king, probably of Penllyn. He lived and hopefully died like everyone else. We don't have his crown, we don't have his throne, we don't even have his bones. We don't know when he died, let alone where, but we do have his name. And that's more than can be said about almost every human being that has ever lived. Thank you for watching.